Hello my friends, in today's episode on Grainificent, I will be showing you how to use this Canon EOS 300 film camera. All the functions, how to change them, what they're for, and a basic overview of how this camera works so you can use it yourself with confidence. So if you like this type of videos, please leave a like. It shows the YouTube algorithm I make videos worthy of showing to others, and hit the subscribe button. It shows me I make helpful and interesting videos. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So how to use this Canon EOS 300 film camera. Starting from the top, we of course have our dial. We will get into the different settings in a moment. We got our hot shoe. That has full TTL flash, as you see by the connections. We have our light, we have our flash. By pressing this button, we can take out the flash. We have to turn it on to any mode, click the button, and the flash comes out and activates. With the flash out, as soon as the camera focuses, this light turns on. This technically serves as a red eye reduction, so your subjects don't get red eyes after the flash, because if you turn off red eye reduction, this light doesn't come back on after you focus. So that's the red eye reduction light over here. And if you try to focus when it's very dark with the flash out, be mindful that the flash will fire a few dozen times, well, maybe not a few dozen times, but a few times, to help with the focus. See, if I cover the lens, the flash fires to help with the autofocus system. So be mindful of that, not to flash a dozen times into your subject's eyes. And when you take the photo, of course, it does the flash. So to hide the flash, you just close it back in. And here up top we have different buttons, the screen. We will get into the functions in a moment. This is just an overview for now. And this is the wheel to change your settings. And of course the shutter release button. On the back we have, on the left, it is exposure lock. On the right here we have exposure compensation. But also in some modes, in complete manual mode, when this is only for the shutter speed, then in order to change the aperture, we need to click this button and then change using the wheel. We will get into that as well. So we have the viewfinder, we have the back doors. On the left here, we have the button we pull up to open the back. We have, of course, our shutter, do not touch. We have the room for our film cartridge with the ISO readers. And over here we have the pickup spool. Of course, we only load film up to this line, as you can see in the video where I show you how to load and unload film from this camera. It will be linked in the description below. And this camera doesn't have a digital back. I don't know if you could buy the digital back separately, because I do not have any idea how to take off these doors. So I do not know if you could buy it separately, or you would have to buy a whole camera with the digital back included. But the digital backs on old film cameras like these are not much useful because they don't show current year. So you can't go up that high. And on the bottom, of course, we have our screw mount to mount to a tripod or something. And we have our battery compartment over here on the bottom. When we open up the battery compartment, be careful not to tear this off, because it's only connected with a bendy piece of plastic, so it can get worn out very quickly. And the batteries are two CR2 batteries. They look something like this. They are 3-volt batteries each, so you need 2 of them according to the diagram over here. One goes in upside down, the other one goes in with the positive side up, just like that, and you close the doors just like that. And over here we have our trigger connection. If you would have the trigger for this camera, you connect it over here. And again, by the doors, we have our manual film rewind. You click this and it rewinds the film, all the film back into the cartridge. But just be mindful that it does not leave the leader sticking out, so it rewinds the film completely inside. On the front of the camera, of course, here we have depth of field preview. When you click it, you can hear the aperture moving. And over here we have our lens release. We press it in counterclockwise and we take off the lens. And inside we see our mirror, and behind the mirror of course will be the shutter. And we have our film contacts, do not touch them as well. We don't want finger grease on them. And lens, well, depending on the lens type you have, lenses can be different, but the majority of them have an autofocus manual focus lever, so you change that to decide if you want the camera to autofocus or you want to autofocus yourself. To put the lens back on, with the red dot, align with the top red dot and turn it clockwise, just like that until it clicks in. So that's from the outside buttons, how to use it. Let's get into some of the functions. When you load your film and it doesn't have a film reader or it didn't read it properly, you go into ISO over here on the dial, and now you can check what ISO it's reading or manually change it to any ISO you want, from 6 ISO all the way up to 6400 ISO. I always use 400 ISO film, so that's where I keep it at. The next function, that's depth of field mode. In the depth of field mode, you choose 2 points that you want in focus, and the camera will adjust the aperture according to have the appropriate depth of field depending on the focal length. And then from that aperture and your set ISO, depending on the light conditions, it will set the appropriate time as well. So let's take a look at that up close. In the depth of field setting, it will check all the subjects on all the autofocus points, and it will try to set the settings so all the autofocus points are in focus, and it will show you what aperture it needs. So let's say we want this here in focus at 80 millimeters focal length and the trees in the background. So if we just do, let's say the majority of the focus points are on the trees in the back, but some of them are on the left here, it will tell us we need, at 80 millimeters, we need an f/27 setting to have all this in focus. If we would want to try something further away, let's say over there, a bit further on the left and just a part of the garage on the right, it would tell us we need 5.6 because it is farther away, so the depth of field grows. But as we see here, even if we put the majority of the points on this on the left here and the trees just a few points, it still tells us f/27 to have this here in focus and the trees in the back. And with the ISO set to 400, it tells us that at these settings it will use 1/125th of shutter speed. So in the depth of field function, it will try to set all these focus points that are marked on the screen in focus. And if we do it wider, of course it should be a lower f-stop since it's a wider field. Let's try. Of course we get 6.7 f-stop because the shorter the focal length of the lens, the deeper the depth of field is. And of course we take a photo and it does those settings. And if something is impossible to get into focus, let's see this super up close here, our aperture will be blinking that it cannot achieve such deep depth of field as you see on the screen now. Our aperture is blinking because it can't set such a deep depth of field from this close. So this mode is useful if you're taking, for example, group shots where people are one behind another and you're not sure if you have the right f-stop to get everybody in focus and you don't want to go too far into the f-stop, so you don't have to get longer exposure times or higher ISO film meter, stuff like that. You could use this mode and the camera will decide what f-stop it needs to get everyone in focus that are on the focus points. So the next mode we have completely manual mode. In completely manual mode, when we use the wheel, we change the shutter speed. If we want to change the aperture, we have to click this right button and holding it, use the wheel. Then we change the aperture with this wheel, just like that. And in aperture priority, of course, with the wheel, we change our aperture and the camera decides about the shutter speed. In shutter priority, of course, we change the shutter speed with the wheel and the camera decides about the aperture. If it's blinking, that means it can't open wide enough to get a proper exposure. but it will still allow you to take a photo. So be mindful of that. In program mode, it's almost like full auto, just you have some control, because when the light meter measures the light and it gives you a reading, you could maneuver around to have the same exposure, but when you turn the wheel, it will be different settings for the same exact exposure. So you could change your, if you get a reading, you could change your aperture or something. You would want a shallower depth of field or a deeper depth of field, then you could change the settings with this, and it will automatically change the shutter speed as well for those lighting conditions. L, of course, is lock, so it locks your camera, turns it off. You can't do anything now. To preserve battery, always keep it in lock. The green window, of course, is full automatic. When it decides it wants to use a flash in specific lighting conditions, the flash will pop out automatically. And if it gets a reading, you cannot change the reading. So you have no control other than the ISO you put in. But other than the ISO, you have no control over the readings. And the rest of the modes are creative modes. You got the standard portrait, landscape, macro, if you got a macro lens. But they don't do nothing interesting, so I won't be going over through them. That's every camera in the world has them. You could read about that. And here from these buttons on this side, when we have it set, for example, complete manual with this top button over here, you can choose your autofocus point where camera should be focusing. You can choose them all. You have a whole bunch of 2, 4, 6, 7 autofocus points to choose from. The button on the bottom here, that's your self timer. When you click it, a timer appears on your screen. It shows you that you're in timer mode. That means when you focus and click the button, it will be counting down 10 seconds. Just like that. To turn it back off, you click it again till it disappears. And the function button, you have these functions that are on the side of the screen here. So when you click it once, well, depending where you left off, but when you click it, you can go through all these different functions. These are the first function is red eye. If you turn it to 0, it turns off the red eye correction in photos. That means this light won't be lighting on with the flash. When you turn it to on, when you use flash, this light will light up to reduce red eye. The second one is beep. If you have it on 1, it will beep every time you focus. Just like that. If you turn it to 0, the camera will not beep whenever it's in focus. So I like to keep that on to hear the beep. The next function down, the 2 squares, that is multiple exposures. How many multiple exposures do you want to do on a single frame? Up to 9 multiple exposures on a single frame. 1 is the standard, 1 exposure per frame, and more. Like if we do 9 exposures, we will have a number 9 here, and it won't advance the frame until we count that down. It will be just doing multiple exposures. To turn it back off, you just go back to 1. And the final setting here is exposure bracketing. If you want to take different exposures, that takes 3 shots with 3 different exposures. You set here how much should the exposures differ from 0. That's of course nothing. It won't set anything. To half a stop over and half a stop under. 1 full stop over and under. 1.5 up to 2 stops over and under exposure. If you have set 2 stops over and under exposure, let's do this in program mode because it would be better for the camera to adjust the settings. We take 3 photos. The first photo, it shows us we're taking a 0 exposure. The second photo is minus 2 stops. And the third photo, you see this blinking, is showing us that we're taking now plus 2 stops. Just like that. And we take 3 photos with different exposures bracketed. To turn it back off, we just go back down to 0 stops. And that would be all for the function menu. Back here we have our exposure lock. When we say, for example, aperture priority, when we see that we have 1/20th of a second here, say 1/10th of a second, when we press this button, it locks. Now wherever we focus, it will remain the 15th of a second exposure until you take a photo. If you want to get out of this, in order not to take the photo at the locked settings, there's two ways. Either the photo you want to expose, you click this button again for the proper exposure and take a photo, or when you accidentally hit the button and you want to get out of it, you could just change the functions back and forth and you're back into metering mode. And this button, like we already said, depending on the menu here in aperture priority, for example, when we click it, we can do the exposure compensation. We can choose what kind of exposure we want from the camera. In shutter priority, the same, but in full manual, the wheel just changes the shutter. If you want to change the aperture, we have to click this right button and then change the aperture. So these are the functions of this beautiful camera. And a little side note, when you get it, make sure these seals over here are in good condition, because there's this window here that you could see your film through. Well, the film cartridge, you don't want to see your film through that. Make sure these are in good condition, because if they are torn, broken, you could have light leaks coming in this way onto your film. This is how you use this camera. If you want to know more about how to load and unload this film camera, look at the video in the description down below and have fun, enjoy using it. So that, my friends, was how to use this Canon EOS 300 film camera. If you liked this video, please leave a like. It shows the YouTube algorithm this video is worthy of showing to others. And please remember to subscribe if you're interested in film photography content. It shows me I make helpful and interesting videos, and it keeps you updated with all the videos I make. And if you would like to support this video, there's a donation link in the description down below. And also, you can donate through the membership page. And if you would like extra benefits, like seeing the videos I make way ahead of time before they go public, because sometimes I have a line of videos for 2 months ahead, feel free to look into channel memberships, where from $1 a month, you can see all the videos I line up as soon as they're ready, before they go public. Thank you for watching, my friends. Take care, and see you in the next video.